What is the craziest encounter of rich kid syndrome that you have experienced? Girl at work told me she hated her dad. I asked why. She said he keeps asking for money since she used his credit card for a Euro trip and left him an 80 grand bill from last year. Next story. My friend is a commercial pilot and works for a large company that has a flight department consisting of several jets and turboprop airplanes. The owner's kids, and a group of their friends, were granted permission to take one of the jets from the central part of the US to the Bahamas. Upon arriving in the Bahamas, they were meeting other friends and getting on a very, very large yacht for a week. They realized the yacht was equipped with fine dining food, not the type of food they liked. Junk food. They ordered the pilots to fly back through US customs and to their hometown in the Midwest. Once there, they had to pick up multiple sides of barbecue ribs, burgers, hot dogs, soda, beer and piles of other junk food and fly back to the Bahamas, and do so within a time frame that still allowed them to leave with the yacht on time. It costs roughly $5,000 an hour to operate the jet they were using. And it never even struck the owners as something extreme. Edit. Due to the popularity of this post, I called and got clarification on several points that have been repeatedly questioned. The barbecue, ribs, pulled pork and sauce, was the main purpose for the return trip to the Midwest. If you're from the Midwest, or a southern barbecue city, you know what I'm talking about. They don't have this in FL, period. The other junk food was add-on requests from other guests. The plane owner's son had promised, in the months prior, to bring some of the barbecue he had told his other friends, who he was meeting in the Bahamas, about repeatedly throughout college. He forgot, and was catching hell for it. In an act of boldness, he sent the plane back for it. This is the most extreme example of how theses planes are used, and well flaunted, within this company. That's with the understanding that wife shopping trips, sending a plane back to pick up a kid after school to come to FL, ball games, hunting and fishing trips and to dine in a restaurant 3,000 miles away, is commonplace. On occasion, these planes and pilots have been used as angel flights transport ill children and family throughout the country for medical procedures. The pilots for this company aren't paid the best, but are permitted to bring family, spouses mostly, to destinations as space and work schedule dictates. Some senior pilots can stay at company-owned property nationwide if available. Next story. Humble rich kid. I was a club at my college town and my roommate's new friend who drove a Raptor was at the bar. I started shooting crap and we were getting along, so I offered to buy a Y-bomb, vodka Red Bull shot. Being as wealthy as he is, he said, "You don't have to do that, man, save your money. Round will be on me." I explained to him it didn't bother, I was having a good time, and insisted I buy the shot. Immediately after that, he pulls out a black Amex and purchases the nicest VIP booth in the club, around $3K. Then ask what drink packages they have and ask if he could buy 2 bottles on top of Mac's package. Looks at me and goes tit for tat. Safe to say I don't recall much after that. Next story. My personal favorite was in college. Kid down the hall from me bought a brand new Fender Stratocaster and played with it for a day and got bored and sold it to me, case and all, for $20. I still have it and play it 15 years later. It's a great guitar. Next story. When I was in college, a friend that was heavy in the frat life told me about a freshman that got kicked out for having a servant flown to town to do the hazing chores he was supposed to do. Next story. One time a college dorm mate next door was stressing his dad hadn't yet given him money for the month, and $1,000 wasn't going to last him for the week. Meanwhile, I'm having to donate plasma to afford my next meal. Life just be like that. Next story. Teacher here. 2 spring to mind. My first teaching job was at a private middle school in one of the wealthiest enclaves in the United States. I taught a kid who told me he didn't finish his homework because his helicopter had stalled over the weekend, so he couldn't leave his family's island. He was telling the truth. Same kid was also a huge pain in the butt who wanted to misbehave with the cool kids, and then would lie through his teeth while crying when held accountable. His parents knew he was a jerk and cared enough to bring me a case of wine from their vineyard as a gift every parent-teacher conference or before the holidays, but they didn't care enough to discipline their kid. I now teach at a private school in Europe, and I'm absolutely gobsmacked by how many parents are happy to pay $35K per year to dump their kids into boarding so they can do F all as students and repeat grades 1/2/3 times because they don't make any effort whatsoever. Next story. There was this rich kid in our class who was literally disgusted by us buying used stuff, like computer parts, on eBay. Once during conversation I said I bought on eBay memory module for my PC and said to me that I should have a little dignity, and if I buy used stuff I should keep it to myself. Next story. A 14-year-old in full volume cursing meltdown. Where the F is he? Because the pilot of the private helicopter that had brought him there had gone off to get a cup of coffee. The kid was done skiing for the day and found it totally unacceptable that he had to wait 10 minutes before he got flown home. Next story. I was that poor kid who ended up getting a scholarship to a ridiculous private school. The one thing that stood out massively for me was probably how much people cared about what everyone else's parents did. Like your parents' achievements counted for yourself. My daddy just brought a new plane. Yes, a literal statement. So what does your dad do? When I replied F all, they laughed and thought I was being cool about it. Next story. There's a lot of rich kids in my particular business program in university. I met this one girl a few months ago at a social. We were chatting a bit about our program and she proudly told me about how she threatens to sue the school whenever things don't go her way. She also said something to the effect of, they have to take the threat seriously because they know I actually have the means to follow through, haha. Next story. A girl in my school was surprised by her parents in the school's parking lot with a new BMW. A freaking BMW. Everyone who is out is basically watching this go down and she starts crying. At first we are all thinking it's because she's so happy, but then she runs back into the school. Apparently they were supposed to show up earlier, I'm assuming when there would be more students to witness the surprise. I felt bad for the dad because he looked totally embarrassed and sad about it. You know, in his head he's like, I created this monster. Next story. My college roommate's mom gave him $1,400 for the weekend just randomly. He blew through the whole thing by Saturday, asked his mom for more money and was screaming at her because she promised $1,400 for the weekend, and he spent most of what she gave him on Friday, which isn't a part of the weekend. Next story. A Saudi guy in the UK got in a crash, with light damage to one side of brand new Mercedes. He called for one of his assistants to come get him, even though the car was fully drivable. My friend rolled up on call with his tow truck and asked the guy where he wanted the Merc towed. The guy gave him the keys and said, "Keep it, I don't want it." Next story. GF family is wealthy, she's working her way to it. But, she was waiting to get a chance for a promotion, and the words "I cannot believe anyone would make somebody work for almost a year to get a promotion" came out of her mouth. And I laughed. Next story. A long time ago I was dating a rich girl, not insane rich, but rich enough. Well, I'm from Norway and we have a recycling system for plastic bottles. You get like 10 cents per bottle. Her family had a literal mountain of empty bottles and crates in their warehouse. They had a warehouse. I asked her dad, what are you gonna do with these? For which he replied something like, "Oh, those are from our employee staff parties from a couple years back. I just haven't had the time to get rid of them." Logically I told him that I'd recycle them for a percentage. He said, "Keep it all, guy." So I did. I had to do multiple trips to several different stores, but it ended up being like $1,300 bucks, which was insane money for me at the time. I bought a guitar for the money. I realize now it's not a crazy story, but for me it was insane to earn that much money for 4 to 5 hours of work because her family couldn't be asked to do it. Next story. Kids trying to straight up bribe bouncers and even police officers. This is less surprising when you realize they were international students from rich families where bribes are common/expected. Thankfully, they'd learn really quick to not do that. Next story. I had 2 friends in college who were from UAE. They were brothers, and their parents were sending them to school in the US. They were actually pretty cool and down to earth. If not a good bit weird. They knew I didn't have a ton of money and couldn't afford to do the cool stuff they did, so they covered me all the time. Crazy stuff, like renting a private plane to go to a concert, black cars with drivers, expensive dinners and exclusive clubs. On the weird side, they slaughtered a goat in the bathtub to make a traditional Arabian dinner. And they wore far too much drakkar.